All right, today we're going to dive into a really fascinating sermon by Elder Jordan Herrera. He's tackling a huge question that a lot of believers have. If it feels like the end is near, why is it taking so long? His message is called Interruption, and that title really hits the nail on the head. So, let's get right into it.
You know, if you just turn on the news, it's not hard to see why people are asking this. You see the wars, the famines, the natural disasters, and for a lot of people, that lines up exactly with biblical prophecies. So it creates this real tension, right? The signs are all there, it seems, but the promised end hasn't happened. So, yeah, what is the holdup?
So, that leads us right into our first big idea here. What's going on with this promise delayed? And this really gets at how a lot of people are feeling right now. If you study prophecy, these kinds of world events, they aren't just random tragic headlines. No, they're seen as signposts, markers on a timeline. And that, of course, creates this really urgent feeling, this expectation, which naturally makes the continued waiting, feel even more intense and, honestly, pretty confusing for some. Okay, so before we go any further, let's make sure we're all on the same page with a key term. The official theological word for this whole event is parousia. It's Greek, and it basically means an official visit or a grand arrival. In Christian theology, it's the big one, the second coming of Christ. That's the promised future we're talking about, the one that feels like it's on pause.
So why the delay? Well, Elder Herrera points to a really common idea, an explanation you hear a lot in faith communities. He calls it the perfection problem.
So here's the thinking, in his own words. The idea is that the whole timeline, the parousia itself, is on hold, because believers haven't reached a state of perfection yet. It's delayed, it's interrupted because, well, we've never gotten there. And the big takeaway from that idea? It basically puts all the responsibility for the delay right on our shoulders. It's our fault.
But hang on a second. Is that what the Bible actually means when it talks about perfection? Herrera says no. That's a huge misunderstanding. See, the common way people think about it is being completely sinless, without any flaws, which, let's be honest, feels totally impossible. But if you look at the original words, tamim in Hebrew and teleos in Greek, they're not really about being flawless. They're about being complete, whole, what we'd probably call spiritual maturity.
And this makes so much more sense when you look at the bigger picture of how salvation is understood. It's seen as a process, right? In 3 stages. First, there's justification. That's a gift from God. Then, sanctification. That's the lifelong process of growing and maturing spiritually. And finally, you have glorification. That's the final, perfected state believers get. But here's the key. It happens at the second coming. So glorification isn't something you have to achieve before it happens. It's the result of it happening. It's kind of like you can't be late for your own surprise party by not showing up to plan it. The party is the finale.
Okay, so if our imperfection isn't what's holding everything up, then what is? Well, Herrera suggests that maybe we're looking at this all wrong. Maybe it's not an interruption at all. Maybe it's a pattern, a historical pattern you can see all through the scriptures. And that brings us to this idea of a history of waiting.
So here's the core idea. The big counter-argument. Waiting isn't the exception. It's the rule. It's not some strange anomaly or an unexpected interruption. It's the norm. You can see it woven into the very fabric of the biblical story, from the very beginning to the very end.
I mean, just look at this timeline for a second. The scale is just staggering. Think about it. Adam and Eve get this promise of a savior, and that promise takes 4,000 years to come true. Noah warns people about the flood for 120 years before it even starts raining. Abraham is 100 years old before he finally holds his promised son. Even Daniel, who gets these mind-blowing visions of the future, is told, hey, you're not going to see this play out. You're going to rest and you'll rise at the end of days. Waiting isn't just a theme, it's absolutely baked into these stories.
And this pattern doesn't just stop in the Old Testament, it continues right on into the New. In fact, Jesus himself, in some of his last talks, seems to be setting his followers up for a long wait. He tells these stories, these parables, right, about a master who's delayed in coming back, about a bridegroom who takes so long to arrive that everyone falls asleep, and another master who only returns after a long time. So while his followers might have been hoping for something to happen right away, it really sounds like Jesus was hinting at a much, much longer timeline.
Okay, so all of this brings us to the most practical question of all, doesn't it? If this delay isn't our fault, if it's actually part of the plan, then how are we supposed to live right now, in the meantime? This is all about what it means to be living in the interruption. And this question right here,
It changes everything. It shifts the entire focus away from anxiously trying to figure out the why of the delay and moves it toward intentionally deciding how we should live. What do you do when you're living in this in-between time?
So, the big takeaway here is that all the energy people spend trying to calculate why there's a delay, it's just misplaced. According to Herrera, the real challenge, the real call, is to focus on how to live during this period of waiting. How do you navigate this interruption?
And he really boils it down to 3 simple, powerful actions. First up, don't sleep. Now, he doesn't mean literally sleeping. He means don't become complacent, don't start doubting the promises you believe in. Second, watch and be sober. This is all about being spiritually alert, paying attention, and staying clear-headed instead of getting swept away by all the chaos in the world. And third, read the scriptures. Go back to the source. Ground yourself in the original promise. That's what keeps your faith strong during a long, long wait.
And really, the whole message is wrapped up in this simple command. It's not a call to frantically trying to achieve perfection and make things happen faster. No, it's a call to just maintain a state of faithful readiness, however long it takes. And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? Maybe this waiting period isn't some problem we need to solve. Maybe it's a space we're meant to live in with real purpose.